My name's Ashley Nance. I am the Professional Development Manager for the Bloch Career Center. I'll have all of you eventually introduce yourself, but we're going to go ahead and let Tate here introduce himself as well. Tate has been really working with me to put on a lot of these events throughout Career Week this week. So I wanted to give Tate a chance to introduce himself and tell I guess everyone in the attendance a little bit about himself.
Hi, I'm Tate Barry. I'm a junior here at UMKC, and I'm a double major in business administration and jazz studies. I'm also the Bloch School Student Association president. Which, speaking of which, we are going to be having our elections in these coming weeks, and we are going to have positions available for available to run for president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and student activity fee committee representatives. So yeah, essentially, Ashley and I work really hard to put these events together. We got 4 panels today from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Is that ending correct, Ashley? Okay. And on Thursday, we're going to have an elevator pitch competition from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And is going to be from 6. Everybody's going to be in there. You're going to be giving your elevator pitch to everybody in the Zoom call. It's going to be 60 to 90 seconds. You're going to get 60, 90 seconds to introduce yourself and propose a business idea of your call. You can take the format however you can take the format however you want. You can include a single visual if you want. And there will be cash prizes for the event as well. The first place gets 500, second place gets 250, and third place gets 100. If you are interested in the event, I'm going to drop my email in the chat, and you can let me know. I'll keep you in the loop.
Hey, I put your email in the chat for you.
Oh, Ashley beat me to the punch.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'm going to hand it back to you now.
Awesome, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and unmake you host and then move you back over to attendees. All right, everyone. Hello. Thank you, for being here and taking the time to be on yet another Zoom call. I'm sure all of us have so many Zoom calls, but we really, really appreciate your time and you taking just the effort to talk to us about what you do. As I kind of mentioned in all of our emails prior to this chat, this is part of a larger career week. I work within the Career Center at Bloch. So my job is to really help students explore different career areas and explore what they could do with their bachelor's or their graduate degrees from UMKC Bloch. And so obviously today we're here to talk a little bit about just supply chain and what all you ladies do in your role. So I'll let each one of you actually introduce yourself. But before I do that, I wanted to put it out there for all the attendees. This is being recorded. So this will eventually be able to be shared with all of the people who have registered for this event. So if you don't quite catch everyone's notes today or don't quite catch everyone's names, you'll at least have that information later on. And if you do have any questions that you want to ask the panelists, feel free to use the Q&A button or the chat feature. I'll be looking at those as well to just kind of monitor that and answer any questions that come through. All right, so Rachel, do you mind just going first and telling us a little bit about you and the company you work for? We'll get into what you do for a living in a couple questions, but just a brief introduction.
Sure. So Rachel Hook, I graduated in 2009 with my bachelor's. I was actually one of the very first class to get a supply chain management degree at KU. There was 14 of us. And then I had an internship at that time, did a few other things, and then got my master's from UMKC, my MBA, back in 2015. I work at Waddell Reed, which there's 2 portions of it, really. So there's, well, 3. There's a holding company, which is the parent. And then there's an asset management portion, which is Ivy Funds, or Ivy Distributors, there's a bunch of those. And then Waddell Reed, which is the advisor sector of that.
Excellent. Emily, you want to introduce yourself? Here, I'll unmute you.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, I lost my mouse there. My name is Emily Huffman. I am the supply chain director at Advent Health Shawnee Mission. I actually graduated from nursing school almost 20 years ago. I have a bachelor's in nursing from the University of Wyoming. And then I moved to Kansas City about 10 years after that. And through a progress of events, ended up working in supply chain, doing value analysis, and then went to actually UMKC's MBA program. I graduated from that in 2017. I have a regular MBA with an emphasis in supply chain and logistics. And like I said, I currently work for Advent Health Shawnee Mission, which is a hospital system here in Kansas City, actually based out of Florida, and it used to be known as Adventist Health System, but is now called, was rebranded about 2 years ago to Advent Health. So we have the Shawnee Mission Medical Center, and then there's a new hospital being built in South Overland Park that we cover thousands of, feels like thousands of primary care and other physicians' offices, some freestanding ERs, surgery centers. We also recently acquired the hospital in Ottawa. And we also have a partner with PT Solutions here in town. So lots of stuff to buy supplies for.
Very cool. All right, Ekaterina, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ekaterina. I also went to UMKC, graduated in 2018. Right now, I work at Children's Mercy Hospital. So I'm a project support analyst, and that's within the Enterprise Project Management Office. When I started in 2018, I started with an internship, and we were more of a functional organization, Children's Mercy was, and we're slowly moving into becoming a matrix, sort of in a weak matrix state right now. So I would say between 60 and 70% of my projects are supply chain, either touching supply chain or directly impacted by supply chain, or a few of the projects I'm working now are supporting efficiencies. So Children's Mercy is really based on the lean system and reducing waste. That's trivial to all of our functional operations. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of you. Obviously, we have two of you that are more in the health services industry, and then Rachel, you are in more financial services industry. Can you tell us each about your job? So what does it specifically mean to do what you do? Many of the students that are on this call, they might have some idea of what supply chain means. Some of them might be getting bachelor's degrees, some of them might be getting MBA degrees. And so can you tell us a little bit of what your day-to-day looks like and what your responsibilities are?
Want me to go first? Okay, so within supply chain, as I'm sure most of you know, there's a huge gauntlet of different things you can do in it. You can do logistics, you can do capacity planning, you can do all that. I fall into a subsector within procurement. I don't actually do anything with the actual tangible things. So when you're thinking of supplies and things you can touch, I don't do any of that. My job is a strategic sourcing manager / business partner, contracts manager. There's a whole bunch of names for the same thing of what I do. Basically, it comes down to I negotiate contracts, usually for intangible items such as services, and probably 95% of what I do is SaaS-based solutions that my company wants to implement. So what that means is I solve problems. Which is what I really like about it. And someone will come to me and say, hey, I want to buy this. And we'll go through the requirements. We'll go through what it looks like today. And we'll go, do these requirements make sense? What is your problem that you're trying to solve? Once we get to that, we'll create a document, usually an RFP, that outlines everything that they currently have, their current state, what they need, the problem to be solved. And we'll send that out usually to multiple suppliers. That's how you get your leverage. So there's a few key components to that, but you always want to have that leverage and build that leverage and really understand what you're getting. So a lot of times, you have to put your Sherlock Holmes hat on to figure out what is the problem and how do we get to the solution. So most people think they can negotiate. They love bartering for prices, right? I was the same way before I got into this. Yeah, I can negotiate. It's different if you do it once in a while versus if you're doing it every single day. You know, some people go, yeah, I can negotiate. I don't need procurement involvement. They might have the price where they think they want it, but then you get multiple suppliers involved and all of a sudden the price gets cut by 50%. And oh yeah, by the way, the supplier that you were thinking about going with, you know, they weren't going to agree to set deliverables. Oh, they wanted time and materials for everything, not a fixed amount. Oh, there's all this other risk that's out there with the supplier that you may not have thought about because you haven't done this 1,000 times. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I do.
So a lot of solving problems. Emily or Katerina, you want to dive in?
Sure, I'll go next. So like I said, I'm the supply chain director for Shawnee Mission. So I will say that a supply chain director for a hospital has definitely evolved over probably the past like 5 to 10 years, especially it used to be kind of like a kicking boxes type of a job where like you got told what to buy, you bought it on typically some sort of GPO contract, and then you put the items on the shelf. And that was like the sole purpose of the materials management. Over the past years, especially in like larger health systems, there's been more of an involvement towards what we kind of like to call strategic supply chain and strategic management. We're looking at everything that we purchase outside of labor as a whole and as a whole process, and trying to be, especially within a health system, strategic about how we buy that. We call it like right. This is a supply chain thing, but right item, right place, right time, right cost, and for the right patient. So a lot of what I do is similar to Rachel. I also negotiate for service contracts here for things like snow removal, kidney stone, lithotripsy, just any variety. We have thousands of different services that we have. A lot of service contracts on equipment that we own because we don't want to necessarily work on and fix every single thing that we own here. So a lot of that. I also manage all of our capital procurement. So for all of our capital equipment, I help manage that budget and help people. I don't tell them what to buy, but I definitely point them to the right direction in terms of a vendor that we want to use. I would say that's something I spend a lot of time telling people, come to me with what you want, similar to Rachel. Tell me your problem, tell me what you need to solve, and I'll tell you where we can go to buy it or where we can go to get that. Because within healthcare, we're heavily contracted in almost every single space. We have a preferred vendor that we want to use for things. The other part, I obviously also am still in charge of the day-to-day operations of supply chain within the hospital. So even though I'm not necessarily like directly involved, I have managers that manage the day-to-day operations for me. I am ultimately responsible for making sure that we have product in our warehouse that goes out to the clinicians to use for patients. So I would say the majority of my day is probably spent meeting with people and determining what their needs are, and then communicating what those things are and what the impact is going to be to my leadership here. Here at Advent Health, supply chain is considered part of finance. That's who I roll up to the CFO. So that's who I report to here. And that's how we're managed, and we're seen as a finance arm, not as an operations arm. I've done supply chain different places, and it's different everywhere, how that's kind of looked at, but here it's seen as a supply chain thing. So, but yeah, that's how I'm sure like the rest of us, I spend the majority of my day now on a Teams call or in a meeting of some sort talking to people. So.
All right, Ekaterina.
Okay, I needed to get off mute there. I'll base a little bit of my job based on both what Emily and Rachel said, because they both mentioned that, people come to them and say, and they help answer, what do you need? And usually me and my team are the ones that are asking. So I work with, as an enterprise project management office, we used to be in the finance area. We're now just recently moved into under operations. But so enterprise project manager just means that, the executive leadership is starting to prioritize projects that can either save the hospital money, or they can, you know, create money, or just solve different solutions. So perfect example, though, one of the projects I'm working on right now is basically, and I guess I'm trying to think about how much I want to say about it, because a lot of it is private so far, but we are streamlining the supplies within each storage area, within each clinical department, throughout each location. And we want to make sure that the shelving is up and there's a standard across the hospital. So in order to do that, we have to buy shelving, we have to talk with clinical leaders about, hey, you've been ordering all of this stuff for however many years, and maybe you don't need that. Maybe we can help you, you know, just kind of minimize the work that you have to do to order supplies from a clinical standpoint. And now the supply chain coordinators and the supply chain team can help support you in that. So a lot of what I do is, you know, I work with procurement. So Rachel's, you know, what she does there, and contracting, and we're working with vendors to get like supplying for the shelves. And I would work with my procurement subject matter expert for that. And then same thing, I work with distribution, because it'll be the distribution team and supply chain that is going to be moving back and forth, moving the supplies back and forth. So. And then as an analyst, I do lots of other things. So I'm in the project management office, and not all my projects are in supply chain, but we have financial and tech projects as well. So looking at it from that lens, you're kind of dipping your toe into a lot of different stuff, which is fun.
Well, and I love that all three of you mentioned that supply chain is not just tangible items that you can touch. Like all of you are talking about not just those supplies, but services and vendors and contracts and all the parts of supply chain that touch these different business areas, which is why I think so many students find this to be a really fascinating area and something that they want to pursue. Emily and Ekaterina, I know this was a question that some of our students had on their mind, especially in light of COVID-19. What do you like about working in the healthcare services area, and how does supply chain and healthcare intersect? And is there any insight you want to give into that?
Sure. So like I said previously, I actually started off as a nurse, and I did all kinds of different nursing before I got into supply chain. And then I was managing a surgery center here in town, and an opportunity came up to do value analysis, which is basically like kind of like what Ekaterina does, like looking at our contracts, looking at how we're utilizing supplies, and trying to figure out the best way to maximize our dollars on that, typically by consolidation to a single vendor and or utilization, and then also managing corporately negotiated conversions and stuff. So I did that for a while, and then got into when I went to grad school, they offered me, I was working for HCA at the time, and they offered me this position as a supply chain director for a smaller HCA hospital. And so I already had obviously a passion for healthcare and taking care of patients and like that kind of stuff. And the best part about nursing is that you can do 1,000 different things and 1,000 different specialties, and you can like move around in that and like do a bunch of different things all the time. The part that I love about working in supply chain in healthcare is that I get to be in this one kind of like smaller section of it, but I get to interact with every single part of the hospital. I definitely have relationships with every single director here, from the facilities and EBS people, food and nutrition, to all the ancillary departments, to lab imaging, those types, respiratory, and then also obviously all like the clinical departments, and then our major service lines like the OR, oncology, cardiology. So I get to see all that different stuff, and that I love that part of it. And I also think, like, to be truthful, I can't, there's tons of people that are supply chain directors in hospitals that don't have clinical background at all. They work up through different methodologies to get there. I truthfully cannot imagine doing this job without my clinical experience. Like, I would be horrible at it. Like, that's part of, like, that was my that was my draw to get hired here for sure, was that I had some clinical background. So not necessarily a traditional path to a supply chain director, but it makes my job so much easier, because honestly, I can push back on people and be like, no, I know you don't really need that. That's not necessary to get the job done. But it also makes me empathetic to their cause as well sometimes. And we do things because I have the ability to kind of like see both sides of it. And so that's like really, really helpful. So I'll let.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you said that, because when I started in the project management office, before we moved into operations and all of this, our lead project manager had experience in, I think, fraud examination. He came on to do an audit of our financial system, and then now it has moved out from our team, and he's the supply chain director at Children's Mercy. So he has you can definitely jump around. The good thing with projects, just working in a project management office, is that to an extent you can jump around. And then back to the question on healthcare. So healthcare is such a broad industry. Of course, that's given, but hospital work and healthcare is often talked about together, but I honestly think it's completely different. I really love working at Children's Mercy, and I think just because of the nonprofit side of the hospital, there's a lot of care that goes in. People are really passionate about the company, and I don't know if I would want to work somewhere that was driven by that just didn't have as strong of a purpose, because you can see the purpose every day. Like, you see it in the kids, everyone wants that. And what's good too is that, the hospital industry is a little behind. So I think just traditionally it's about 10 years behind in operations. And that's not very fun if you're, at least for me, I've always wanted to do something more innovative. But of course, healthcare in itself is innovative. So many startups are in healthcare. It has great job security, of course. So it's really good in that sense. And of course, the job security is great. That's just in the industry itself. Yeah.
All right, Rachel, we'll shift to you. So financial services and supply chain, I think, is an area that maybe students don't really think about. Again, students, I think, are thinking about supply chain as just getting product from point A to point B, and don't really even think about financial services and even what you were talking about, sourcing as part of that. What do you love about how, I guess, your two interests have merged?
Well, I think that there's so much opportunity within the financial services sector, and not just within this sector, but really every company is going to need software. They're going to need tools and applications for their employees to use. Within financial services, it's incredibly complicated what they do. So for instance, let's look at Ivy, the asset manager, right? They have to do all sorts of data analysis to determine, what they want to invest in, what's going to make money. There's compliance that goes with that. You've got to make sure that the data is secure and that it's running properly, and that, some supplier is not going to move your data across, into a country that doesn't have any sort of data security protection laws in place. It's so challenging. And when I first started at DST originally, I dipped my toe in the water to negotiation, and they're like, hey, do you know anything about technology agreements? I said, no. And they're like, well, we're going to teach you. And it's like learning French, because it's so complicated, and it doesn't transfer over from one thing to the other. So I have to rely on my internal business stakeholder, which they really are my client. So I'm working for them because I'm trying to get them the value that they need. So they have to teach me this incredibly deep thing that they're doing, and they're the expert in what they're doing. I work with a lot of VPs and C-level executives that are deep into the weeds of exactly what they do. And I have to understand it enough and work with them enough to make the deal make sense. Because, one of the big questions I ask them is, what's going to keep you up at night? What's the worst thing that could happen in this contract? With the data, could the data be spilled onto the public? Could they share personally identifiable information? Think about that from you guys. So, if you have a 401k, or you will in the future, they have that personal identifiable information that could be spread. I mean, how often does identity theft happen? All of that's so important. And the things that they get to do with all of these tools and and how it translates across the entire business. So I could be working on a marketing project one day for like, branding initiatives or content management applications. And the next day I could be working with IT to do something really cool there, or compliance. And so I get to touch all areas of the business. And by touching all areas of the business, you get to meet different people and different experts and know more about the company than a lot of other individuals might, because you're talking to all of them and you're getting into the weeds of exactly what they're doing. It's actually really exciting and it's really challenging. So, if you're a person that gets bored easily, which I do, it's a great place to go.
Awesome. So I think all three of you kind of talked about how you got into this industry just by the nature of talking about yourselves, but is there anything that you wanted to add about why you stay and what is something that makes you excited about it?
I'll jump in there. I was thinking about this a lot because, I think that first of all, mentorship is really important. I can't stress how important it is for me to just work around people who are just good people and they want you to succeed. And I'm not saying that you can't find that everywhere. I'm so grateful that a lot of these large companies have such a good system in place for onboarding. When I started on this team, it was very new. So the team had only been up for about less than 2 years, but the people on the team were really experienced. And I just knew that I wanted to stay on a team that was, that had good people that wanted to see me succeed. So yeah, that's all that really matters at the end of the day. So.
Emily, it looks like you were gonna say something.
Yeah, actually, I would agree with all of that. Like, healthcare is an amazing place to work in. And I know I was just looking at the next question about how's the industry, how's it changed in the past 5 years. And I would agree, we are when people come into healthcare from being in a previous industry, especially on the business side of it, they're like, oh my gosh, you guys are so behind. It's so atrocious. And so it's kind of exciting that you get to make changes and do that kind of stuff here, do that kind of stuff and move the needle forward. I talk about this all the time though. It is like the Titanic getting away from the iceberg sometimes to get things to move in healthcare, just because you're dealing with regulatory agencies, payers, patients definitely have a choice about where they go. So all that stuff, just getting the needle to move can be difficult. And so when you can accomplish that, it's great for sure.
I think what I like about it is you're always learning, because of the regulatory nature of most companies, and in financial services, it applies probably not quite to the extent of healthcare, but pretty close, just the amount of data that you're dealing with. But you're always learning new things. You can't stagnate. So in some areas, you do the same thing day after day and it gets old and your skills don't apply as much, if things change or to another industry. I think within sourcing, you can take your skills pretty much anywhere, because you always need to know how to figure out and solve problems. You always need to know how to negotiate something and develop leverage even for yourself. So, and I couldn't agree more with what they're saying about good people to work with and the training. A lot of places don't train you how to do this, but you have to find a team that's willing to help guide you, and you have to be willing to look into things and try to figure things out yourself and to ask questions. A lot of people feel like they shouldn't ask questions because it makes them look not very smart, but that's what I do on a daily basis. Is I ask 100 questions all the time if it makes me look stupid or not, because you have to understand. You can't fake it until you make it, because everything you miss in a contract could lead into a lawsuit down the line, or to a massive data exposure, or a countless other things. So every time you're reading a contract, if you ever get done with it and you feel like I've covered every base, you've missed something, because you can't. But you just try to do your best, and you work with the lawyers and you work with your business people. And yeah, it's a constant state of learning and just becoming a better version of yourself constantly.
All right, Emily, I know you even alluded to this as well, about how maybe hospital work in healthcare is shifting and has evolved, but do either or any of you want to discuss how you feel supply chain has maybe evolved in the past years, and maybe some trends that you see happening in maybe the next 5 to 10 years, innovation and healthcare and financial services and all of that coming to intersect. Do you see any trends coming in the future?
I want to say one more thing about that just really fast. I will say, and this has been a trend that I've seen, like probably I know the next question's about COVID, but we had always gone from this model of like, we went to the vendor and said, this is how much we're going to buy in a year's worth of time. We're going to, and we'll probably buy about this much every month, but we're only going to keep like 10 to 21 days on hand. And we were really, and after the recession, especially in 2008, it really shifted in lots of places to a just-in-time system. Manufacturers quit having warehouses full of furniture, warehouses full of flooring, warehouses full of tons of stuff, and they're like, we're going to make it as we need it. And it worked, like that was fine. And then 2020 happened, and I'll get like the next question, I'll get more into that. But I think we saw this shift to like a really just-in-time model. I think we're going to see another shift to maybe, like, I would almost call it like a hoarding, stockpiling in some specific sectors for sure. So.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say for just most places, so mainframe and desktop applications are kind of in the past. So everything's shifting to a SaaS-based, cloud-based licensing, which, by the way, vendors will try to confuse people and try to make cloud seem very mysterious. It's not. All it means is that the licensing is just held in their server, not on-prem. So companies all used to store everything on their own servers and manage it and have teams to run it. And now it's shifting away from that, where the supplier runs it and the supplier manages it and does the updates and things like that. So yeah, it's not as complicated as it seems. And then I would say a lot of acquisitions. So in the past 2 companies I've been a part of, we've been acquired. So, you know, that's going to be a constant. I think that's going to be more and more as we get more global, as we are, more and more companies are going to be doing that. So it's really just needing to be open to change and all the new regulations that are coming across from different parts of the world and just the globalization of all of that.
Yeah, I love that. I just love the point about the cloud, and I know that your background is in that, and so interesting, especially when it comes to contracts and all of that data on the cloud. That's really where we're moving to. And I know that that's not necessarily supply. Well, it touches supply chain. It's not really supply chain. Cloud is just, you know, where you store your data, and that can touch all sorts of different industries, or departments rather. But yeah, I guess that's a good one. I think of it from your point of view, and when I say you, I mean like the students, because the cloud, when I was in business school, and like I mentioned, I graduated in 2018, business was business, and then like tech was tech, but so many of these things intersect, obviously. I mean, that can be said, but yeah, cloud is important. I'm looking at my notes here. So I thought of this question in more of a children's mercy sense, just because that has been my experience. And so how has it changed really in the last 5 years? So children's mercy has been focused on really on a high level securing its market share in the area. We're really well established in this area. We have a great name, but we're also just trying to secure ourselves nationally. And we created a research tower that just recently opened, and we are going to employ researchers from all over the country and the world to try and, become a leader in the industry. So from that, and also I think, we raised our minimum wage to $15 an hour, which was just so important as well. So just becoming more and more financially secure is something that, and then we do that through actually reducing waste, and that's part of the lean system. So I know that a lot of you, if you're in business school, have learned about that. It's just about how can everyone think about minimizing everything. And I think that that's just, I mean, certainly from our perspective, that's just the way we're going to be in the future. We've been hoarding things and supplies for 20 years. And so many of the people, you know, that we work with have been, but now it's just about, you know, keeping things, don't let things get stale, keep them fresh and keep the operations moving. So, yeah.
I forgot there's one other thing that's coming up. So there's a huge push for diversity. So to source to minority and women-owned businesses. So it doesn't mean that they have to win it, right? We're not just going to give it to somebody if they don't have the best price, they don't have the value, but to be inclusive and include them when you're looking at suppliers to make sure that you're getting the right range across all areas and you're not getting preferential treatment to the mammoth companies that have been established forever. So I think that's going to be really important in the future as well.
Yeah, I think I've seen that push across so many areas of business. And I think that's a great point. All right, so let's talk about COVID then. Obviously, it's been this big thing over so much of our lives over the past year and almost even a year and a half to think about it. And so how has COVID-19 impacted your industries and impacted the work that you do?
I'm going to say I've had a lot of jobs where I've worked really hard. I have never worked as much or as hard as I have over the past 12 months. I did not get to, like, working from home was not an option. I was here every day from February 28th on, like 12 hours a day trying to make this work here. I will definitely put this on my resume as like the year of what, I don't know, the year of chaos mixed with like a lot of hope, put it that way. So obviously like the whole PPE thing, like I spent weeks figuring that out. I was super fortunate to work for the company that we did. Corporately, we invested millions of dollars into procuring PPE. And so now the biggest challenge we have with that is managing it and like figuring out how it's going to work moving forward. Kind of like what I alluded to before, like definitely we all were like banking on that federal stockpile of PPE, which was frankly like non-existent in terms of the demand that was actually going to be there with a truly global pandemic. And so like, I think you're going to see a lot of places, and Katarina is probably going to cringe when she hears this, but like stockpiling 30, 60, 90, 120 days of specific, like, specific categories of products for sure on hand, just because, and some equipment as well, just because we, the biggest gap analysis all of us have ever done, probably like, oh my gosh, we were missing and just were so unprepared for how this was actually going to go down. And then I think from my perspective, at least, and kind of what my company is like working on for the future is the hardest part about a global supply chain is, I don't think people like sometimes grasp, is that, okay, so last June, Malaysia didn't work for a couple of months, and India, like they were completely shut down. And so that's where like a lot of the nitrile stuff comes from, like nitrile exam gloves. So they were shut down for a month or two last summer. Well, we just finally in like November started seeing the effect of that. And I like almost ran out of gloves again, like a few months ago. And so we're working really hard to do some risk assessment, risk aversion towards that moving forward. But we are going to continue. And I think the other thing too, like in healthcare, like the stuff that you use to make a surgical gown, an isolation gown, an N95 mask, the drape that you use in surgery, it all is like two things. Like the raw material for that stuff is not diverse, and the way that the things are made are not diverse. So we're going to continue to see back orders and shortages on those types of supplies that use this like spun shellacked cotton, basically for like years still. Like that we're going to be feeling the effects of that. So yeah, that's the part that it's exciting because it's like a different way of looking at things again, and like a way different kind of demand planning than what we've ever done before. And we're seeing hospitals having to go, like I said previously, like hospitals used to go in and like tell the vendor how much we were going to buy, and it's completely the opposite now. They're coming to me and saying, I need you, we'll make this for you. We'll guarantee to have it for you, but you have to commit to buying X amount every single month for like the next 3 years, or we're not gonna, or you won't get any. And you almost are forced to, I don't want to say almost, you are forced to participate to some degree, because otherwise you won't have anything, because everybody else around you is participating in those types of agreements, because we don't want to get caught in that situation again where we don't have stuff to hand to our clinicians, able to take care of people safely. It was really scary for sure last March and April. Like, I did not sleep. It was, as a nurse, to like have to say to someone, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to reuse this mask until it breaks. Like, that's an awful thing to have to tell someone. So but definitely hopeful for where this could, like, I think we're gonna see people set up in a much better way, because this will happen again at some point in time. So hopefully we'll be more prepared.
Emily, thanks for all of the work that you did. And I can't imagine, I wanted to jump in now, because I was, so the projects that we were working on during COVID were mainly just revenue cycle and financially driven. I didn't touch any supply chain projects during that time, so I don't actually know how it was impacted, Children's Mercy was, but I feel like Emily said it all, because that's a lot. Yeah, so thank you.
For me, the biggest difference is we didn't really have anyone at the home office. We had a couple of IT people and some facilities people, and that was it. Like, our entire company was home, and we're still home. So just getting used to doing that. And also, I think that, before, in different companies that I've worked for, it was, you could work from home once in a while if you needed to, but now I think it's going to be changing to the point where people realize you don't have to be physically in the office to get your job done. And actually, in a lot of cases, you're more efficient because you're not having people stop by your office and talk to you just to see how you're doing, which, we all miss that, but you actually have to make a concerted effort to call someone now. So when you're working, there's a lot less distractions. So I think that's going to be a big difference in the future. And also office space. So you might not have as many people that do work in the office, or you might have office sharing or desk sharing, or kind of a work from anywhere approach. So I think the world's about ready to get a lot more flexible in that regard. But I have talked to certain companies, and they still want to be able to watch their people and make sure that they're working, as opposed to just viewing the results. So I think it's gonna be company dependent.
Yeah, I myself, I can do my job from home. I don't prefer it, but I actually do like working in the office. But Rachel, to your point, it's fascinating for me, even as someone who works with people in careers and works with people with a variety of different industries, and students who are looking at a variety of different industries, what that flexibility looks like from industry to industry. Obviously, there's going to be some career paths where you just can't work from home. That's not an option. I mean, Emily, you were even talking about that wasn't an option for you at all. But other industries, it might be. I myself, I've been working from home since last March, and I'll probably be working from home until the fall. So it's something that varies heavily on different industries. All right, so we are at the 45-minute mark, so I'm gonna do 2 more questions. Time has flown, just so we have enough time for any students to submit any questions as well. So what I want to talk about next is what's something that you're currently working on that gets you excited, that is something that you're excited about.
So I am currently actually the vaccine task force coordinator for my hospital. That was kind of a thing. They're like, oh, you manage the logistics and supplies and contracts for things. Like, certainly you can manage the logistics of getting, 50,000 vaccines into people's arms. So, and again, clinical background helped a little bit on that one. But so I've been doing that since, we started working on it in November, and did all of our employees and physicians first. And then we transitioned to doing mass vaccination clinics at Church of the Resurrection in Leawood. Maybe some people might have heard about that. We're doing like a few thousand people every weekend. So I would definitely say, like, that's been like one of the, it's not traditional supply chain, but anytime I feel like that you're organizing something and getting things, whether it's people or whatever, from point A to point B in like the most efficient way possible. That definitely is a logistics and supply chain kind of thing. So that's been a really exciting project to work on. I'm going to be kind of sad when it's over. So amazing to get that done for the community, and I'm really looking forward to when that can transition to being done like mostly in primary cares and that kind of stuff. But it's been an amazing thing, and I'm super excited that Advent Health got to participate in that and do that. So
I've got two things, I'll make it quick, but so one is just to piggyback on kind of the conversation earlier, just working from home. So Children's Mercy, and this is the importance of contracts. We are so Children's Mercy Hospital, the main campus downtown has, we have several offices there, but we also utilize offices in the Crown Center So they have, just executive offices, and we have probably 3 buildings. And so those contracts are ongoing because there was no deadline for them. So we are trying to change the space in there so that people can come in and work in like more of a collaborative environment, kind of like a WeWork space. So currently helping the rollout for that, and then helping people get equipment to permanently work from home based on, not everybody, but there are people who will be working from home permanently after COVID. But the other thing I really wanted to touch on too was just that I'm studying for my PMP, and I'll be taking that exam in a month. And it's a hard exam. It's Project Management Professional, and it's one of probably, I would say, the top 2 most respected certifications in project management, and it's key. It doesn't require that much experience. I mean, it does require, I think, 35 hours of project experience overall, but those projects can relate to so many different things. So I wanted to mention that because it's not something that I was really aware of prior, but it's fun and it's exciting. It's the best way to manage a project. And once you have that certification, it's equivalent to, you can put it after your name, and people will understand that you know how to run a project efficiently. You know all of the things that go into it. So yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Well, first of all, good luck on that. I'm sure you'll do well. I took my certified supply chain professional certification when I was 7 months pregnant. I don't recommend doing that.
Yes, that's amazing.
It's exciting though. Well, me, it's a little different. I wouldn't say like I'm super excited for what I'm doing right now, but I will say it is a giant learning opportunity. So we're being acquired by, what's going to happen is we tentatively are going to close at the end of April. That's the goal anyway. And, they're going to have Macquarie's going to acquire the whole thing, and then half of it's going to LPL. So they're splitting our asset manager and our wealth manager off. So right now, we're working with procurement with both sides of Macquarie and LPL. So on a daily basis, I'm talking to people from New York, Australia, California, people in Boston, just all over the place. So going through our contracts and, not going through our contracts, but just talking about, what's going to happen. So it's been interesting just to talk with other people all over the world on a daily basis. And obviously there's things we can't share until close, but it's been a really big learning process. And internally, we're looking at our contracts and making sure we have, everything lined up and everything well documented, because whenever you do a contract, you have to upload into our ERP system, and just making sure we have everything organized and kind of going through that. So it will be something really important. And also it's going to make me a better contract negotiator, because now you're looking at the back end of, what if you get acquired? What contract language do I need in the front end to make sure it's a smooth transition? So.
All right. So with our last minutes together, I wanted to just talk about maybe advice that you might have for students who want to pursue this type of industry. Ekaterina and Rachel, I'm really glad that you mentioned just like your advanced certifications and things that students could pursue once they're in this industry. What should students be thinking about now? So while they're maybe pursuing their bachelor's degree, or while they might be pursuing their graduate degree at UMKC, what can they be doing now to really set themselves up for their best future in supply chain or in healthcare or in financial services?
I can tell you that if you're getting into hospital supply chain logistics is something that anyone's interested in, lots of major healthcare organizations do have some sort of like, I don't want to call it a residency. Some places call it a residency. Some places call it like a development program where they're looking, because a hospital supply chain director is a hard person to find and train for sure. So kind of like a lot of systems are looking at kind of a grow your own mentality where like they're seeking out people that maybe have just a bachelor's degree in supply chain or any kind of business industry and an interest in supply chain, and or maybe like some really entry level experience, and they're taking them, putting them through like a 2 to 3 year program, and then with the expectation that you would then stay with the company for a little while and be put into some sort of like supply chain management role. I mean, not a director at the get-go definitely, but in some sort of like management leadership type role. So if that's something that you're interested in, I know a lot, I know for sure 3 companies in town that do that kind of like development program within specific to supply chain. So that's definitely something to consider.
I would say to have some conversations with people if you're looking into this. Look at LinkedIn, find people who do what you want to do and reach out and talk to them. Mentorship is everything. If you can find the right fit, and just in general, if you want to get into something, have somebody look at your resume. So, I mean, take it to a few people, take it to some recruiters, make sure that resume is good before you go in, and get a lot of practice interviewing, because and at least in my industry, I mean, we have interviews with the manager, and then you get the whole team to interview usually. And then you will get, sometimes like with me, they had all of my people who I'd be supporting, like the VPs from different areas across. So it was an intense interview process, and it usually is. So make sure you're ready for that.
And to piggyback off that, and just the communication, I think, is just vital, because you get into a professional setting, and it's maybe something that it's just not professional settings are different. They're not like school, and that's what. And I only speak about this from my experience. I'm so thankful that I am good at communicating in all of my relationships, whether it be, like family, friends, professors, reaching out to all sorts of different people, strangers. And I think that it's not even about, actually everybody's point is really good. And I think LinkedIn is just the best tool. So I think a lot of you probably already know that. But in general, like looking at yourself and saying, how well do I communicate? How well am I able to talk about where I'm at, or eloquently, how well do I respect myself? How well do I respect others? And how can I use that to form bonds with strangers, or, maybe professors? And I think on that point, professors would be really vital as well, because you never know, if you are an undergraduate and want to go to get a master's, just a quick like 2-minute conversation here and there, you're probably like in and out, like doing a bunch of stuff, but just a 2-minute conversation of, hey, do you have 2 minutes of your time? I just want to chat. It'll help the professors remember you. It'll also help your communication skills and just getting out there. So I'd recommend that.
Oh, and if you do want to do negotiation of any sort, or just to have that skill in your back pocket, I don't know if Rita Reed is still teaching her contract negotiation class, but huge plug for that class if she is.
Excellent. So we are out of time. Katerina, did you have one more point that you wanted to
No, sorry, I was coughing.
No worries. All right. Well, we are out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and let all of you go. And Emily said she had a hard stop at 11. So thank you so much to all of you. Again,